Hi everyone, you're with Rick and Maureen from Hunterline in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. We're continuing with our build along of our 50-foot Queen Post covered bridge. We're doing pretty good. I hope you're keeping up with us because there's a lot of homework on this project. So what we want to do today is start the roofing system. And all the rafters and the sheathing and the shakes. So, Maureen, go for it.
Okay, so you need to get out your drawings and cut out the gable end view and the gable rafter template and the typical rafter template and tape that down to your board with some wax paper on top. You're also going to need your 3x10s, that's to make the rafters, and the 1x12s for the siding on the gable ends. So as you can see, I've got most of mine done here just for time's sake, but I'm going to show you how to do at least one of those rafters and a gable end. What you need to do first off is make sure that the top sill of your bridge, this piece here, is equal distance from the last vertical post, or the end vertical post on each side. I just used a little ruler, excuse me, and just measured the distance, if you can see that, from the end post to the end of the top sill. So just make sure that that's equal distance on all four sides. And then we'll show you how to do one of these rafters. So you need to take your 3x10s, lay it on your typical rafter template, and cut a new angle here. You'll see on the drawing that you've got cut lines, so just make sure you line up your razor saw. I'm using an X-Acto knife here. I've got a really sharp one, and it's relatively thin lumber, so it cuts very easily. So use your cutting line, and at the base as well, use that cutting line. And
it's the same thing as previous. The angle that you're cutting is the opposite side is used on the other side.
Alright, so you get those two sides done.
You'll see what I mean in just a minute. Okay, she's cutting the angle on the top.
Now if I was...
Flip that over and that's the same angle.
Use this one and you can cut the other one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is very little waste when you do this.
So you need to do, there's a total of 19 typical rafters that you have to build. There's 17 that are between those gable ends. Okay, and then you have to use another 2 typical rafters to attach to the gable ends, and I'll show you what I mean about that in a few minutes. So you need a total of 17 from both gable ends. If you've got the Ultimation slicer, it works really great. You can get that perfect angle and get all the perfect length for all of those rafters. It'll save you a lot of time.
But not everybody has the slicer, so for this section we're going to do it manually.
Yeah. So then I'll show you, you've got 4 templates here, so you can build 4 at the same time and just let them sit and dry. Usually maybe you can probably lift them up after about 10 minutes or so. So then you want to cut your these bracings here. I like to do the longer ones first. So that's a little bit of a different angle. Just hold it on the side and cut the one side. And this side. And I can use that, like Rick said, I can use that angle for the top piece, top brace. It really helps if these are all equal, that's for sure, and all the same. So that's one little typical rafter. So I'm just going to show you how I glue that. Just stick a little bit of glue on the top end.
Just speaking of rafters, there's many designs used for rafters. this is one of the more common ones. Another one is using ridge board along the top. But for this particular one, we are doing a rafter this way. And if you want to use the other methods, go ahead.
So we have to put the bracing on. So get that outer frame settled and take your smaller piece, and I just put a dab of glue just over the drawing where those braces will be attached, and just make sure that they're lined up nicely with your drawing.
This is one of those places, if you wanted to make a jig, you could, but by the time you make the jig, you can have most of them done.
And put the bottom one on.
And if there's little inconsistencies between them, that's okay, because they really were that way.
When this is all set up and dried, you can turn it over or just take off the glue on the back and file off any ends of these braces that might be overhanging. So you just have to make sure they're pretty well set before you put a weight on them. Okay, so then you can, if you've got all four done, you could put a cutting mat on top and just weight them. Leave them for about 10 minutes. Okay. So now we're going to do the, we'll just let that dry and set up a little bit. We're going to make the gable rafter. It's a little bit different. As you can see with the typical rafter, we've put the braces on top. We've glued the braces on top of the outer rafter. With the gable rafter, you put those braces inside that outer frame.
The reason being that you want a flush structure at the end, so you can put the planking on it. If you use this one for an example with the planking, it will be very uneven. So we make the end ones a little different so that they're flush.
So you can see I took that last piece of 3x10 that I used for the typical rafter, used the angle on it to cut the braces for the gable rafter, and I cut right here, which is different on the inside of that outer outer frame, I guess you would call it, on both of them. So I've got those cut. I need to cut the outer frame, and you need 2 of these gable. So you want to cut that angle straight up and down, and cut it at the base. We didn't put cutting lines on this one, Rick.
But that's because these are exactly the same. You can actually do the cutting down here.
I could do it down there if that's right. Okay.
And if you notice on that one, the cutting line would be up in the T of rafter somewhere.
Okay.
Oh, I could have lined the T up with the rafter and used the T as a...
Okay, so again, just glue that at the top. I can see my one end here is a little bit off the length of it, so I'm going to cut that a little. And then again, these need to be glued, the braces need to be glued inside. So put a little bit of glue on each end. I like to take my tweezers and try and get it in there. Okay, take off the excess glue, and now the bottom one. Okay. So we can let that all set up. I'm going to put a cutting board on top, and what you can do next while that's setting up is you can get all your siding cut for the gable end, and that is your 1x12s. Now you can see when you look at the template, the drawing, they're all different lengths of course, but you don't have to be specific right now with the lengths. Just cut, I think there's something like 12 or 13 of those planks on the gable end. Just cut yourself a bunch of different sizes. Is a great place to use up your scraps of 1x12s. So just cut enough to go across there, and once it's glued on the gable end, what you're going to do is flip it over and just cut them off, trim them off, and I'll show you that in a minute.
That saves a lot of time because you don't have to worry about every angle and
Yeah.
every length. You just glue them on and trim them down later.
Definitely. So what I'm going to do is, this is still kind of setting up, but that's okay. I'm just going to go ahead and glue my planking right on this gable rafter up here. So just take your glue and you could, maybe do half of it here. And just start putting them on. And here you can, skip a board if you want to, break a couple boards if you'd like to do that, or just do them all.
One of the things about a gable end is it's pretty high off the ground for any kids to come through and kick the boards off, and it's also protected from the overhang a little bit, so that these kind of boards don't really rot or any or go through any vandalism because they're just too high off the ground.
Need to cut another bigger one here. Just going to slice one off. Or maybe I could have left that one missing. Yeah, I need a little bigger one there too. Get yourself some more glue. Oops.
Once in a while we get asked of why the walls don't go right to the top of the eave. You gotta remember this is in the steam era and there was a lot of smoke going on, and it had to have some way of escaping instead of just being caught inside the rafters all the time. So that's why the top 16 inches or so of the walls are open. A lot of these had cupola on top to let all the smoke out. Use all the little scraps, eh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you run out of scrap, you have to cut some scrap.
Mm-hmm. Could probably use some of the ends I cut off here. I'll just cut a couple more little pieces here. Just need some tiny ones. So I'll let this set up and I'll show you how to put the typical rafter on. Some of these might not have enough glue, I think. Little end ones, put a little extra on. Okay. So we'll just let that set up. Put my cutting board on there. This one is all pretty much set up, that roof rafter, so we're going to put it, well, we've got two here that I'll show you how I put these, attach these. We need to keep one for the gable. So what I'll show you is, if you can get your framing template and side view, which is this drawing, this shows you all the roof rafters. And what I did was I kind of took my bridge and taped this to the wall, kind of try to line up the end of your top sill to the drawing, and just tape that drawing right to the top wall. And it will kind of help guide you. It certainly doesn't have to be exact, that's for sure, but it does help. So you can sort of see, you have to, usually what we would do is put the two gable ends on at the end first and make sure that they're flush, but I wanted to show you how to cut them and glue them together and get most of this set up before we tape this. So,
and this is one of those places where if you're right-handed, you start on the left side and work your way across. And if you're left-handed, you do the other way.
And the other thing that you want to remember is when you take these little rafters and glue them on, they all have to be facing the same way. Okay, so I've got the bracing facing to the left. Okay, so just make sure that they're all the same, if you can see that here. Okay, so what I do is just, you have to be kind of patient to do this. It takes a long time for them to set up. So you might be able to only do maybe 5 or 6 and just leave them and then come back to them later.
Now, in more modern day construction, these rafters would have what's called a bird's beak on it, which is a little cut on each side that sits on top of that top sill, and it kind of locks it in place. But I guess they didn't think about that back in the early 1800s.
So give yourself enough glue. Make sure you put enough in that little cavity. I'll show you. I'm just trying to hold it in place. Rick, can you just touch that where I put that glue on that rafter? I'm trying to get it in the camera here. People can see. Yeah, it's just quite a bit in there. Okay, if it's oozing out a lot, that's okay. Just for this purpose, it's easier for it to attach. So you want to get them lined up as best you can. Make sure the glue is on the top sill of the wall. And you just have to kind of put them in place and hold them for a few seconds till they, well, probably a good minute, to let them kind of set up. Or they're going to start tipping over. But you can see that, just watch them. If they start to fall over, just give them a little tap and push them till they look vertical. You've got lots of extra glue there, that's okay. Let it sit for a little bit and then just take it and take it off with a tweezer. Works well. So you can see it's probably best just to do maybe 3 or 4, get them lined up, and then you just have to kind of keep touching them, making them vertical.
One of the little things you can do along here is all the peaks should line up. So one of the processes we do after we do 5 or 6 or 7 of them, you look along the peaks, just eye it along the peaks, and it'll tell you if one's a little this way or one's a little that way.
I don't want to...
Sometimes that's not a big deal, but you will line them up.
It'll be much easier when you put your sheathing on if they're lined up. I don't know if I can get a view here. And if you're looking down and you see that one of them is out of line, that's okay. You can, it's usually pretty easy to pop these off because there's not a lot of glue surface, so you can just pop it off and look to see why it might be a little off. Okay, it might be that you have to shift it a little bit on that top sill. So that's a little trick, using that template on the side wall to give you an idea where they're supposed to be placed. They look pretty good. Some of them are a little off, but I think looking at it by eye, they're pretty good. So we've got all the typical roof rafters on this bridge here now. We've got the one gable end, so I'm going to show you how to do this last gable end. We've got it here, and hopefully it's dried. Just take your X-Acto knife and run it along between the wax paper and your wood and try and lift it off. You've got all the siding on there. You might have some wax paper left on there, but that's okay, you can just file it off. Okay, so flip it over, and there's a little bit of wax paper, a little bit of glue. Just take your tweezer and remove that. And then make sure that you've got a really sharp, you've changed your blade on the X-Acto knife. And what you're going to do is trim off all these ends. Okay, so I just kind of take it from the top. Good pressure on the rafter itself. This isn't quite set up yet, so I might lose some of that siding. So you have to put some good pressure. So that's one side done. And get the other one trimmed. And then the inside or the bottom. If some of them overhang a little bit, that's okay too. Oops, I just cut my finger down. Got a trim there. Whoops. And then on the ends you can give that a little trim off as well. Oops. It helps if your X-Acto knife is really sharp, for sure. Okay. So there you've got your gable end. Oh, I see a little piece here that I should trim off under here. Okay. So that's done. Then what you need to do is find your sign. In your template drawings, you've got a little sign that you can put on the bridge. You can see that. Just take your 1x12, a little piece. You can certainly use a scrap. And we'll put it on the drawing and just cut the length of that. So you're going to need two of those, one for each end. I've done the other end already.
That's a thing that you find about every bridge has a sign on it saying who built it and usually what year or what circa it was built.
So if you go to your instructions, the very last page of your instructions will have a sheet of signs in all the different scales. So take that little piece of wood, and what you can do is you can just put that piece of wood over the printing. This one says Hunter Bridge circa 1840. So just center that on there. You can take your, if you're comfortable, you can take your X-Acto knife and just cut the little piece out, or use a pencil, trace around it and cut it out. Whatever you find easier. So get that cut out. Don't lose your little piece. And then take your little sign and glue it on. Just take my tweezers here. And then you want to glue that to your gable end. Just put a little bit of glue on there in the middle, if that's where you want it. Like that. And if you want, you can take, maybe you've got a little bit of light gray or a little bit of driftwood. If you want to dirty that sign up a little bit, you could just dry brush a little bit of gray, put a couple streaks in it, if you'd like to do that. Now I'll show you how to put that on the end. First of all, we have to add that one rafter that we made. Where did that go? Here it is. So what you want to do is take that gable end, take that last typical rafter that you've got, and you want to glue it onto the back. So take your glue and put it all along the frame. So this is going to make that a lot stronger. So you've got the bracing on the outside of that typical rafter. Line it up. Take your excess glue off. You would let that set up, of course, let it dry. And then what you're going to want to do is glue it to the end. And that has to be flush with the top sill, with the end of the top sill. So you want to get that on there, like that. And just make sure it is flush. Again, let it sit. You want to hold it for maybe a minute or so. And just keep making sure that it's vertical. If you can see that. Yeah. Can you see that there? Yeah. Okay. So I think that's it for the vertical rafters and putting the gable end on. I think we've covered that well today. Rick, can you think of anything else? I think for next week, what you could probably do to prepare yourself is to get that sheathing ready. And what we usually do is give it a coat of your stain. Use one of your stains that you have there, maybe the light color that you are using for this bridge, and just brush it straight on, right from the bottle. Take your brush and brush it on, because that's going to be the underside of your roof. Okay,
when you just do this on one side.
Yeah, just do it on one side. Stick a piece of wax paper on top, and then a heavy book, and place it over each of the sheathing, and let that dry for a good hour or so. Because it's going to minimize the warping. It'll still maybe have a little bit of a warp in it, but
that'll come out.
It'll come out when we glue it. Yeah, in the next session we're going to put that sheathing on and then put the shakes on. Okay, I think that's it.
Looking good.
Yeah.
Like we said, that periodically through the process of the rafters, just eyeball it from one end to the other end to see that they're all the peaks are in line with each other, and not so much the outer sides here. They can vary a little bit, but the peaks, it's important for that all the other steps to come will line up better. Like I can see we have one out right about there somewhere.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to adjust before, but you can see otherwise they go pretty straight. Okay, so that's it for this week.
Yeah, that's it.
Have fun doing all your homework and getting it this far. There's still a lot of work to do on this with the shakes and so on. Read over the instructions so it's fresh in your mind of what to do or what's coming. And we'll proceed next week.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Have a good one.